Hello everyone, welcome to version 1.1 of my Uncharted 2 Brutal Difficulty walkthrough. This will cover chapters 8 through 11, and I'm resuming this walkthrough because I don't have any other projects at the moment that I'm focusing on. And chapters 8 and 9 do not have any combat to them, they're puzzle-solving chapters. Chapter 10 is where the combat will begin, and chapter 11 is my least favorite of these chapters, but I'll explain more about that when I get the chance. So, the fact that chapters 8 and 9 do not have any combat is good because I can at least go on different tangents, and I'd like to talk about the review I'm doing for Resident Evil Village because recently I just finished my graduate certificate in applied statistics at Penn State, and this has allowed me to put time into the review I'm doing for Resident Evil Village. And I must be up to about 130 pages in the review so far. And I've recently finished Heisenberg's Factory for the review, and I'm moving on to Chris's section. And I will have a lot to say about Chris's section because it's the worst part of the game. But at the same time, I feel like there might be some things I need to say about Heisenberg's Factory because even though I feel like I have contributed a lot of information to Heisenberg's Factory, there may be stuff I've missed. And, you know, for instance, Heisenberg's creation of the soldats, the flow of events, like the order in which the soldats were constructed, is a little confusing when you're factoring in that audio log that Heisenberg created when he was experimenting on Oscar the Stable Boy, and also when you're factoring in Sturm, because he mentions removing vital organs to insert the Kadu reactor slash control device. Although the control device, I believe, is the eyepiece over the soldat's face, and this is confirmed by the concept art. But the audio log makes it seem like Heisenberg inserted the control device into the chest. But maybe I'm not supposed to think of it like that. But moving past that, the Kadu reactor itself is another point of contention because Heisenberg said he removed the heart and vital organs when he was inserting the Kadu reactor, yet when you kill soldats in Resident Evil Village, you're able to pick up their hearts. So how the hell did Heisenberg make room for the Kadu reactor and still keep the heart intact? I mean, is the heart supposed to be the Kadu reactor? Is the Kadu inside of the heart? It's not made clear whatsoever. And it's stuff like that I'm finding a lot of contention with the storytelling in Heisenberg's Factory. And then when you factor in Sturm's creation, Sturm feels like one of the very first creations that Heisenberg made when he was creating this generation of soldats because of the amount of inefficiencies present with Sturm. And it's inefficiencies that should be avoided if Heisenberg better understands the process of how to create a soldat. But at the same time, Sturm kind of feels like an extension of the Soldat Panzer, or maybe something that exists before the Soldat Panzer's creation, given the fact that Sturm is armored from the front. And, you know, he's a lot bigger compared to the other Soldat variants. And it's stuff like that that I'm finding very confusing about the storytelling. And I guarantee you guys, this review I'm doing for Resident Evil Village is very unorthodox and not the kind of review you'd see from someone else, because the amount of depth I am putting into this review, like with how thorough I am being with pointing out the plot holes and the cheap shortcuts in storytelling and just the very confusing story moments alongside the gameplay problems of Resident Evil Village, it's why this review is up to like 130 pages. And I swear to God, guys, for a first review, this is something else entirely, and it is a greater challenge than anything for my full-time position, my former full-time position, that really shit job, and also in my part-time position, and also with my graduate certificate in applied statistics. Like, this review I'm doing is probably the most ambitious project I am doing, and the difficulties involved actually feel justified compared to what you'd be getting in a regular job. And it's a difficulty that I'm willing to embrace because there is a lot of heart and soul put into this review. But at the same time, given the fact that, you know, there were a lot of moments of hiatus in the review where I was taking quite a long time to contribute progress to the review, a lot of my energy and a lot of the rhythm I had when actually constructing the review is interrupted, so I don't feel like the later parts of the review are of the same quality as the earlier parts of the review. But that's always going to be a problem with like later parts of a game, later parts of a show, or later parts of a review, because of course a lot of time is put into the earlier parts of whatever you're doing, and you feel kind of burned out with the later parts, or you don't feel like you're in the right rhythm with the later parts of whatever you're doing. And this is just a natural part of human thought right here, so I'm kind of experiencing that. And at the same time, I feel like when I'm doing this review, I'm getting into the developer's mindset, because the later parts of Resident Evil Village show signs of the developers not wanting to go back to the previous parts of what they've made, and actually making sure that the later parts are consistent with what they've set up with the earlier parts of the game. Because I was like that in my review, because there were certain moments in my review where I really didn't want to go through the hassle of just looking back at the previous parts to make sure I didn't already mention this, or to make sure I'm not being inconsistent with my writing. And I'm positive the developers of Resident Evil Village went through a very similar process, because you can just see it with so many of the problems with Resident Evil Village. And this has been a really fun and at the same time very difficult learning experience that I've had to go through when constructing this review for Resident Evil Village. And trying to make sure that I'm piecing together everything, that I haven't missed out on any important details. That right there was one of the main challenges with certain parts of the review, like with Heisenberg's Factory, for instance. And I'm still adding more stuff to the earlier parts of the review as I'm just putting more thought into it, and just spontaneously a phrase that I just think of pops into my head, and I'm just like, I need to put that into the review as well. And that's just one of the hardest parts about writing your review, because you always feel like there is something to add, but then trying to put it in the right spot so that it doesn't force you to overwrite or just rewrite certain parts of the review, that's where it gets very tricky. And alongside this, I'm having to replay certain parts of Resident Evil Village, record them, and then post them to YouTube in a private video. That way I have them for reference when I'm actually doing my review. Like, for instance, there is a lot of Hound Wolf Squad dialogue that is easy to miss if you're not going through Chris's section slowly. So I'm having to redo Chris's section and just go through it very slowly so that I'm hearing all of the Hound Wolf Squad's dialogue. And of course, I can't find this kind of stuff on YouTube. So I've created a video for myself so that I can always reference the Hound Wolf Squad's dialogue in case there are some inconsistencies I need to point out. And this is what I mean when I'm saying this review is a review unlike any other. I don't think anyone else has been as thorough when actually writing a review like I am. And it's going to present a very interesting challenge when I do decide to convert my review into a video, because the review I'm doing is more so a script. And then finding the correct video footage of Resident Evil Village to actually complement what I'm saying in the moment in the review is also going to be very difficult to do. And, I mean, I should know what writing a review is like, because, I've watched Seraphim17 do his review. I've watched Laser Z do so many reviews of the Assassin's Creed games that I can definitely see the difficulties involved with actually writing a review and just making a video out of it. And it has proved to be a very fruitful experience, and like I said before, it is a more meaningful learning experience compared to anything I'd be getting in a job in the real world. And everything in my education has just not contributed in the slightest to what I'd be doing in my future jobs. And I will be starting my part-time job in a week or so, but I don't know if I feel excited for it. I mean, to be honest, guys, I've just felt very disillusioned with the whole idea of a job and the fact that I'm working for corporations, and I view hospitals and military organizations as being the same as any generic corporation, and, working for these corporations, it feels like I'm just going to be dicked around a lot, and this is why I've been looking into a lot of YouTube videos regarding big businesses like Amazon FBA or like eBay or anything like that, because there's a lot more freedom involved with that, and you're not being dicked around by people because you're running the business yourself. And I feel like I want to pursue that kind of focus. where I run a business myself or I'm in the process of buying and reselling items because I find it to be a very fun experience. I think, in all honesty, guys, reselling items, it's like a cathartic experience. It's like you feel a release of emotions, not strong emotions, just very like soft emotions. And it feels like it provides a psychological relief for me when I'm selling stuff for money, and it feels like I'm earning money through a very fun process. Like I've been selling games on eBay for a couple of months, and I've also been selling my consoles. Like I sold my PS4 Pro to a very prominent organization known as DK Oldies, and DK Oldies is a really good organization. They are the most honest people I have ever done business with when it comes to reselling items or just selling any old stuff that I have. And every single time I've sold stuff to them, they have always been honest about the prices, and they've always sent me checks. They're a really good business. And if you guys have anything you want to sell, like any old stuff, you should check out their website and just contact them via email or phone call and just see if they're willing to accept your item. I mean, they do have a price list where they list certain items that they're looking for, and you can sell them. Of course, they are very strict about the condition of the game, and when I talk about condition, I'm talking about whether you're selling only the game or you're selling the game and the manual and the case. And based on the different permutations, they can take off a certain percentage from the total agreed price. And that's perfectly okay with me, because if you're selling very expensive games, even if you're only selling the game itself, and you don't have the manual or the case, it's still a pretty good price range. And if you're selling Nintendo games sell for quite a lot. And, as much as I lambaste Nintendo to no end because none of the games they make ever compare to the sheer quality of Sony or Microsoft's games, although Microsoft, can I really say they make good quality games, because so many of their games feel the same, and they don't have a very interesting roster of niche titles compared to Sony. And a lot of the Xbox games just feel like cookie-cutter, copy-paste games. Like they're just trying to emulate very trendy titles. And that's their idea of unique titles exclusive to Xbox. And I have an Xbox Series X, and I have not found any incentive to play my Xbox Series X. And the only reason I even bother playing my Xbox Series X is if I want to play certain games that I have on my PS3 at a higher quality, because the PS3 is a shit console, even though there may be some really cool games on PS3. But optimization-wise, Xbox 360 and the Xbox One are probably better than the PS3. But of course, the PS4 and the PS5, so much better than those other consoles that Xbox has. But PS3, nowhere near as good as the other consoles in terms of optimization, but it has the better games, though. So which do you favor? Do you favor the better optimization, or do you favor the more unique, more niche titles that actually have character to them? I think I know what I'd favor. Not really so much with the optimization, more so with the niche titles. That's what I would be favoring when it comes to Sony, and that's why I love them as a game developer, because not only do they make really good consoles now, like with the PS4 and the PS5, even though at this moment, given how great the PS5 is, it's kind of forced me to reevaluate my perspective on the PS4, and I don't like the PS4 as much anymore. The PS5 is an amazing console, and the fact that it plays PS4 games, this is why I've sold my PS4 Pro. I sold my PS4 Pro to DK Oldies, and I tried to sell my PS4 to someone on eBay, but they returned it because they said the disk drive was damaged, which I don't really believe, but maybe it was damaged, because I don't use discs anymore for my games. I only use online games when I'm playing my games, but of course, you miss out on the potential to sell your games if you're not using disc-based games, because there are policies that prevent you from selling online data for games. And that's one of the main problems with actually holding on to online games rather than holding on to disc-based games. But, I don't really like using disc-based games so much, because then you have to store them somewhere, and if the disc gets scratched, it affects the performance of the game. That's why I don't stick to disc-based games anymore. But to summarize this tangent I'm on, I don't like Xbox. I don't like the console. I don't like the games, and I fucking hate the controller. The controller for Xbox, especially for the Series X, is one of the worst controllers I have ever used. Maybe the worst controller I have ever used when I'm playing a game. And if you see my community post on YouTube, you'll understand the problems that I have with the Xbox Series X controller. But that concludes the tangent I was on with regards to Microsoft. But getting back onto the main tangent, as much as I do lambaste Nintendo to no end because of the shoddy products that they deliver compared to Sony and Xbox, their games sell for so much money, and if you're in the process of reselling games, Nintendo is the way to go. And going through this whole process of selling my games, and I've even gotten to the point where I buy certain games on eBay, specifically the US versions, because DK Oldies is very strict about the US versions because they're a United States-based company, and they don't accept Japanese games. I mean, they do, but they accept it at a very low price. Like, I tried to buy Resident Evil Deadly Silence for the Nintendo DS, knowing that it was coming from Japan, and I didn't think it mattered which version of the game I was selling to DK Oldies, but it does, and they sent me a message saying that Japanese games aren't really marketable to the US audience, and so we're going to have to send you a lower payment, which makes sense. I can understand why Japanese games would be less marketable to the United States audience. I mean, not really just Japanese games, just more so games that are transcribed in Japanese. I can understand why that would be less marketable to the United States audience now. So this time I'm a lot more careful when actually picking the specific games from eBay. But to sum it all up, this side hustle experience I've been going through has been a really fun experience, and you know, like I said, I am looking to probably do Amazon FBA or maybe do some eBay stuff. And I think it would be a very interesting experience, and you know, a lot of the difficulties and hardships involved will just be on me and not because of some shitty employer or anything like that. And it's a pretty fun experience. So this pretty much sums up all the tangents that I have at the moment, and I've talked over a lot of gameplay, but Chapter 10 is a pretty simple chapter. It's all a matter of memorizing the spawns and knowing when to use the third-person cover trick and when to use the normal cover system. I will say, though, the part where you encounter your very first shield guy in this chapter was very difficult, because the corridor is pretty small, and you don't know where the enemies are going because they don't make any noises with their footsteps, and so I died a couple of times on that part. And then the rest of this should be very simple, so I'm just waiting for the enemies to throw a grenade, and then I'm shooting them because they're vulnerable while they're throwing the grenade. And whenever the enemies are prioritizing my partners, or whenever they're just distracted or just in cover, that's when I'm taking the time to shoot at them. And when these last enemies are dead, that will be the end of this chapter, and we will move on to Chapter 11, which is the worst of these chapters. So this is the escort section where you're having to save Jeff, and your movement is slowed. And this part right here is very bullshit. And I recommend restarting the entire chapter so that the placement of the enemies is in your favor, and you'll have plenty of time to actually shoot them, because if you just restart the checkpoint in general, you won't have enough time to kill those enemies. I think this is what happens normally if you just restart the checkpoint and not just restart the entire chapter. And ammo is very important in this sequence because the game is very cruel with the ammo placements right here, because you don't get a lot of ammo for the sequence, and if you run out of ammo, you'll have to restart the checkpoint to replenish your ammunition supply. When you're having to restart the checkpoint in order to replenish your ammo supply, that just goes to show that this section has huge problems on brutal difficulty. And the enemies drop their long-range weapons, but you can't pick it up. You're forced to confine yourself to the pistol. And you're having to use the third-person cover trick a lot, and your AI partners are getting in the way when you're trying to move around, or when you're trying to use the third-person cover trick. And also, because the shooting on this game is very inaccurate, anytime you're trying to go for headshots, your bullets tend to miss, and so you end up wasting a lot of ammunition in the process. And of course, because I'm picking up the same weapon, I'm not getting a lot of ammo from these enemies. And this sequence seems to be designed with a lot of ammunition in mind, so I don't know why they have to apply this modifier from brutal difficulty into this chapter. I wish the ammo that you got from these pistols was always the same, regardless of difficulty, because it would complement the spectacle nature of this section. And then this part coming up is the worst part. So you have to restart the checkpoint or die, because if you don't, you will not have plenty of time to get inside of this building. And the amount of times I died trying to get through... Oh, I had to leave that in, of course. So that right there was one of the many problems that occurs with this part of the chapter, because you just randomly die on this part. It's so bullshit. It's just garbage, and then from here, you have to kill these guys. If you don't kill these guys, they will hit you when you're trying to run away. And Elena can push you out of this cover, and you'll end up being killed. It's so bullshit. And I have a couple of bloopers saved from this part right here. And this is one of the moments where brutal difficulty rears its ugly head. For the most part, Uncharted 2 is maybe like 85% serviceable for brutal difficulty, but this is part of the 15% that is not serviceable for brutal difficulty. And then you have this part. This part, brutal difficulty does not have a hand on this section. This section is designed around easy difficulty because the enemies are barely doing any damage to complement the spectacle nature to this section. And I'm very close to dying, and the enemies are very good at hitting you during this part. So you need to pick your pauses correctly so that you know when to actually stop and regain your health. And Elena is getting in my way. Like, the times when Elena stops is really annoying. And from here, when you climb up this wall and you press triangle, you'll get iframes and you'll be able to recover health during this animation. And then once this chase is done, this will be the end of this chapter, and this will be the end of this video. But I have two bloopers I want to show. So this blooper right here, this is one of the moments where I end up getting screwed by the game for this part, so I end up dying right here, and it's completely random. And then right here, Elena pushes me out of cover, and so I end up dying. That right there is fucking bullshit. This is why I don't like this chapter for brutal difficulty. It's a lot better than the other difficulties, although it might still be a problem on crushing difficulty. I don't know, because I haven't played crushing difficulty on this game in a long time. I mean, with Uncharted 1, crushing and brutal are pretty much the same. Because remember Chapter 7 from Uncharted 1 on brutal difficulty and how terrible it was? Well, it's actually just as bad on crushing difficulty, which is insane. So, brutal difficulty in Uncharted 1 feels pretty similar to crushing difficulty with its bullshit. And I don't think it's the same case with Uncharted 2 when you're talking about the differences between crushing difficulty and brutal difficulty, but more on this later. This is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.